Are we rolling?
Are we rolling? So it says. Never, always.
That's it. Are we rolling? But yeah, we'll get straight into it. Good morning, everybody.
Morning, Dan.
Morning.
It's been a while.
It has been a while.
And we've gone with the same coloured jacket shirt combo, so we're linking well.
At
least I'm really pleased that I brought a bit of colour into it.
Yes,
you always
definitely.
That's why we invited you on, because of the colour you bring.
We're just like blending into the background, aren't we? Of like
we've done that. I didn't even think. Same colour.
In sync.
Yeah, we're on sync. But yeah, good morning. Good morning, Rebecca.
Good morning, Dan.
Thank you for joining us in this education podcast. Reached out to you a few weeks ago. But first of all, we ask where have you travelled from?
Today, I've come from Lincoln.
Right, that's not too far then. Still,
I feel like I'm on blind date.
Good mileage.
Yeah.
What do you do and where do you come from?
But no, thanks for joining us. The reason I wanted you on was because of your links to education.
Yeah.
But the work that you are doing. And it's all around sustainability, inclusion, leadership, and it really fascinated me. And I've followed you for a long time on LinkedIn, and I was really keen to just get you on to talk a little bit more about it, about the work you're doing. And so thank you for making it. But like always with these podcasts, we'll go back to the beginning.
Oh,
we want to know your story right from the beginning, from school, and what your first kind of career was. After school.
Gosh.
Wow.
So, okay.
On the point.
I mean, how long have we got? Because I can talk, and now you've asked me to unpick 44. Yeah. 44 on Thursday, actually. 44 years. But so from school, well, do you know, I was one of those kids, I think, that actually did quite enjoy school, probably because home life was tough. But I didn't know what I wanted to do at school, if I'm honest. Kind of got pushed down the academic route because I was quite bright and they knew that, you know, I'd get the grades. So ended up going from sixth form straight to university to do a languages degree. But I do remember at the time, like back then, it was like, well, what do I want to do? I was struggling a lot. Home life was really was difficult. Sorry, got kicked out at 16. Was trying to find my way, and kind of going to university for me was never really about what I was going to do or what I was going to study. It was more about I need to get out of Lincoln. I need to get away. I always felt like I was very big, too much. Does that? You know,
yeah.
I always felt like I never really fitted in. So I was like, right, I need to get out. I need to go to a big city. So went over to Manchester to do a languages degree. And like I said, the only reason I chose Manchester, the only reason I chose to do a languages degree was because it was conditioned into me that I had to go to Red Brick University, had to do, you know, a proper academic subject. But I knew deep down, this isn't what I want to do. This doesn't float my boat. And actually, as much as I loved Manchester, and I'm so pleased I went to Manchester, I absolutely hated my degree. I hated my course. I was like a fish, you know, out of water. Because I was there, this, you know, council estate girl that was struggling because I also got diagnosed with anorexia while I was at university. So I was struggling with lots of things, my identity, my mental health. And I was, you know, kind of just on this academic route that didn't suit me. Then I managed somehow to do my finals. Nearly ended up in hospital with the anorexia, but I was like, nah, I'm not good. That's not going to happen. I'm not going to resit these exams. I'm not going to, you know, get to this point and not do my exams. So I did sat my finals, managed to get a 2-1. I do look back and think, imagine if I'd have actually been focused and did what I wanted to do and what I could have achieved. And then came out of university, was still in Manchester again, and didn't know what I wanted to do. And it's only really looking back now that I see really the flaws in the system and what was going on around me. At the time, I didn't know. But I came out with this good degree from a really good university, but it was languages. I was like, what the hell do I do with a languages degree, right? So I tried different jobs, got into a few different industries, was in the shipping industry, worked for Esso, doing translation services for Esso. I was like, I hate this is horrible. What am I going to do again? And then they were offering bursaries for shortage subjects at the time. So I was like, oh, I know, I'll go back to university and I'll become a teacher. Even though I was like, you know, wasn't really, I suppose, where my passion lay. And so anyway, ended up doing my teacher training, ended up teaching in inner city Manchester, which was a learning curve. I look back and I think I wasn't the best teacher I could have been. I was in my, mid to late 20s, had no idea of anything other than school, university, then university again, academic, academia, let's say. And I look at the kids that I was teaching, I was teaching in Moss Side. I was teaching, kind of in the outskirts and in the inner city of Manchester. And these kids, again, the academic system didn't really suit them. There were probably some kids there that would have absolutely thrived in the construction industry and other industries, but I had no idea. I was just literally got to get your GCSEs, got to go to sixth form. Anyway, so ended up, I think, feeling a bit, this isn't, it's great. I loved educating. I'm really passionate about that, but felt really, I suppose, frustrated by the system. So didn't come out of education, stayed in education, but ended up applying for jobs all over. And I look back now and I applied for one job that was a promotion and it demanded leadership experience, which at that point I didn't have. It demanded a lot more experience in teaching than I had. But now I know I was one of the minority women, I think, that actually applied for a job that she didn't fit like 99% of the criteria. But I got the job. And that's where my kind of journey into inclusion and diversity happened, because it was in inclusion and diversity. So my job at that point was to go into schools and so I saw the loose link, right? I was like, right, I've done languages, I'm teaching languages. So, there's a bit of a link there between languages and inclusion and diversity, because I was the role was to go into schools to support minority children from ethnic minorities, refugees, asylum seekers, traveller children. But my role was strategic. So at the time, it was national strategy. I was rolling out national strategy at leadership level, also SLTs, working with initial teacher training providers, head teachers to look at how they can diversify curriculums, to look at environments. Then ended up, I think after I had my second son, there was a big, massive restructure. You wanted the story, Dan. You're getting the story.
It's gripping.
There was. So anyway, there was lots of personal stuff going on. Okay, the eating disorder never disappeared. I ended up in a quite a difficult marriage, let's say, and then ended up after the birth of my first son, ended up going back to work, and it was like great. And up until that point, I was enjoying my work. I was enjoying the stuff that I was doing in schools. Frustrated by the local authority, but when I was allowed to get on and do the stuff in schools with people that were like-minded, it was great. But then after having my second son, my role kind of expanded massively, because all of a sudden they'd got rid of everybody that was kind of on my level. They kept me, and then they kind of re-assimilated lots of other people from across the same, not the same service, the same, the word escapes me, the same sector of education, let's say. And they gave me a team to basically build from scratch. So I was given a team of all women that were all older than me, that had all worked for the local authority for a lot longer than me. And here's me, this like young woman who's kind of, always been a bit dynamic, but had lost her way a little bit, just had a first child. And it was like, my God, did I have to prove myself? I had to not only did I have to prove myself to this group of women, I also had to set the vision and the mission for the service. So basically I had to still go out and do all of the stuff that I've just told you about, all the strategy stuff. But then I also had to train, build, lead a team that was going to go and do kind of the more social value side of it. So working with the families, working with the children in schools. Yeah. And that was really kind of that's what I did then until I left education last year. It was difficult. It was really, really difficult, because I was trying to really break down barriers for vulnerable families, vulnerable children, so they could access education. But I was working for local authority that kept trying to put kind of processes and procedures into place. The leadership just wasn't there. The leadership was, and I was struggling, obviously, lots of stuff going on at home, ended up, having a breakdown. That was the beginning of where I am now. just want to say it was like, you know, you have to hit rock bottom. I genuinely do believe you kind of got to hit rock bottom to come back up again. But also as well, more recently found out that, you know, I've got ADHD, and that was really, really difficult navigating, you know, a corporate culture with a poor leadership, you know, having ADHD and never being kind of recognised or valued for that, and just constantly people trying to kind of, you know, hold me back, stop me from doing what I needed to achieve. So that's why I ended up taking making the bold move to leave only a year ago.
Yeah. Do you know what? It probably makes sense now. I've followed Rebecca's journey for like a couple of years and seen what you're trying, like you push out there and speak about. It's because you're almost talking about your own journey. But there's other people like you that are not as vocal as you, that almost kind of just sit quiet and say, well, this is just the way it is. Whereas you're not. You push it, you push for change. And I think it's clicking now. Even for me, just sat here, just listening to that first part of why you're doing what you're doing. There's a big purpose behind it, isn't there?
Massive. Yeah.
And it's funny because we spoke about people getting in education, didn't we? Like when you're in it, they never leave, do they?
No.
Like we've had so many guests who've come on that have never left, but they fit into a different kind of category, really. Like what you experienced wasn't an amazing experience; it was really challenging. And how many versions of you is there out there already?
Yeah.
So what you're preaching and talking about is really, really critical for those that are looking for that voice to go. You know, why am I struggling here?
It's interesting because I think you mentioned about there are a lot of people that, and I'm not saying this is unique to education because I'm sure it's across other industries and probably construction too. It's like we don't see a world outside of what we're doing. And I know I speak to teachers now and they're like, how did you get out? Oh, I can't get out. I've got my holidays. I've got my pension, you know, I'm just working for that. And that upsets me. It really does upset me because I just think how many people out there are not having the impact that they need to have in the world because of the systems and the structures. And I always say this, you know, it's not people, it's the systems, it's the structures that they're working in that are really stifling them. And I think it's the same in construction, which is why when I first came into construction, I ended up, so that kind of evolved as I didn't leave my job. Well, actually, that's not true. I started the business. So although I only left my job last year, I was building the business for 5 years before that. And it was only, and kind of started out in other industries, manufacturing, automotive, all male heavy, let's say. I hate to say the word male dominated, but which is interesting considering I'd come from only leading women, which in itself had massive, there was lots of bullying when I look back. I think, anyway. But interestingly, you know, with construction, I think again, I came in and I was like, okay, I'm going to do some work with leaders in the industry. I'm going to do some one-to-one stuff, some leadership stuff. They asked me to go in and do some well-being things as well, you know, for teams. And so I did that for a little bit. And then I was like, hold on a minute here. I can see the massive gap here. There's no point in us trying to fix people, right? I saw this in the local authority for nearly 20 years. You know, we're going to put on another mental health awareness workshop. We're going to train some more mental health first aiders. We're going to literally make people the problem when really it was the systems that they were working in. That's why I kind of pivoted the business to do, it would have been so much easier for me to carry on making money out of doing one-off sessions around, you know, wellbeing, inclusion, diversity, but I just knew it wasn't landing. And for me, I've got to have an impact. I've got to make a difference. I can't make a difference on my own. You know, when you said about there's lots of me out there are lots of me out there. And I'm hoping the more that I get out there and the more people that see what I'm doing, the more people will collaborate with me. And that's how we're going to make a difference, you know?
Yeah, it makes total sense. What's your thoughts on all this?
Well,
let's talk about the leadership part then, the cultures that are created, and you know, let's talk about this piece because this is a really important piece here. It's not, you can't change people. No, it's systems that are in place.
Or lack of, or badly run systems, and I think where I'd started to look back in, it was quite, obviously you said about when you were 16, you sort of got kicked out of home. It's like, that was just, it probably still is a huge thing, isn't it? Probably even for younger, especially females, I find. I think males have their problems, but you probably get mothered, as the term goes, a bit more. And that must have been, at 16, it must be quite traumatic, really, after having that sort of environment where you had to step away from that scenario. But it's, I suppose what's leading to that is leadership started. Then you took your own leadership, in reality. Is that right? Yes. I took my own decision to do that, which, kudos to you. You probably didn't know at the time, but at least you empowered yourself to do that. It's
interesting because I first got kicked out when I was 14. And she said, yeah. And then anyway, there's, like I said, there's a whole other podcast there. Mm-hmm. And eventually it was for good when I was 16. And do you know why? Right? I love my mum and I love my family to bits. And I probably have a better relationship now with my mum than I've ever had. Mm. But they just didn't know. I mean, they've got their own stuff going on, right? Okay, my mum, they're an Italian family. She was brought up, by Italian parents in an English culture. So there's lots of stuff to unpick there, let's say. So what I'm trying to do now is break that cycle of generational trauma. Okay, but yeah, I guess. At the time, it was awful. And I remember being estranged from my family for a long, long time because it was like, how could they do this, But looking back, as awful as it was the making of who I am now because it was literally, I was like, I've got no, financially, emotionally, I put myself through university. No one helped me. Everything I've had to do, I've had to always put myself first. And I suppose I say put myself first. I think emotionally maybe not so, but in terms of being able to survive, yes.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I think just going back to how it's all kind of linking in then, so you've come out of all that with lots of experience early on, and then you're seeing these gaps now in the businesses just from real life, and a lot of people don't see them. They just get sucked into the system. That's the system it is, and they go through it and they're like, well, they like it or they don't, they take their own path. Well, you're trying to drive change. I've seen it. I've seen like the posts, the messages and what you're doing. But it's not easy, is it? No. So you're seeing glaring gaps within construction firms especially. And the reason that you're on today is because construction and education estates especially are linked very strongly, especially when you've got estates teams that are running, £1 million projects. They're bringing them companies in to their home and they're bringing that culture into their home. So just talk to us about the gaps that you've seen where, you saw something and thought, I can make massive change. What was it about construction specifically?
So that, again, has been a journey and it's all still evolving. And, I think as I get more experience, as I become more self-aware, I'm starting to see more how it's all fitting together. Yeah? Sorry. And I think what first happened for me was seeing, I suppose that gap around gender, right? That's how it started. It was, there's not enough women in the industry. I recognise that we need, in order to be able to lead effectively, there does need to be a better balance. So I started off by championing really women in the industry. That's where my podcast started, so kind of I saw the gaps. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is that I really saw the gaps around inclusion and diversity. And then obviously as I've got more experienced in the industry, I'm starting to also see how, that kind of that leadership piece and that gap in leadership and inclusion and diversity is also means that we're struggling when it comes to innovation and struggling when it comes to adapting to change and adapting to working in a modern world. So it's things like the way that we're working, the systems, the structures, even the 9 to 5, how do we kind of modernize that so that we can bring in that talent, that younger talent, not just bringing in the younger talent, bringing in from other sectors and also training what we've got within our industry. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that for construction for me, okay, it's the backbone of the country, okay? It has a massive impact on everything we do, okay? Everywhere you look is construction, right? We live in houses, we drive on motorways, okay? And we're having a massive impact on people's mental health, on the environment, yeah? But for me, I feel like, there is a massive opportunity to flip that on its head okay, and to look at what we've got within the industry, the pipelines that we've got coming through, and how we can really unlock that potential, right? So we've got great talent, we've got great, neurodivergence, we've got great, just across the board diversity that we're not making the most of because leadership is falling short. And I think one of the things that I think really strikes home for me, and again, it was similar in education, is that we are putting, and this is what happened to me, and I think this is probably why I'm passionate about it. I went off on maternity leave doing one job very well, okay? And I came back off maternity and was like, right, you've done that job really well, so now we're going to put you in a leadership position. We're not going to train you. We're not going to support you. We're not going to give you what you need. We're just going to help you, let you figure it out yourself. I did seek out myself, so ILMs. I did end up doing lots of coaching courses, lots of training. Did my ILM and all that. But I had to do that myself and, had to seek that myself. And the same happens in construction. You've got people that are brilliant at what they do. Brilliant, technically, and then they end up in leadership positions or they end up running businesses, and there's a big gap there. And some people shouldn't lead, okay? It's a bit like parenting. We can all do it, but doesn't mean we should all do it, Yeah. But there are also leaders out there that could be amazing, but they're not given the support, or B, they're not given the headspace to develop that because of the pressures that we've got in the industry.
Which is...
Do you think that's the lack of, though, the leaders not knowing how to sort of support?
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Is it that just that cycle of people rolling into those roles and then not learning enough to then pass the baton down?
Absolutely. I think there's an element of that. I think there are some amazing leaders out there, right? But, my observations, because, are that the ones that are leading really, really well don't end up really making it to the top. Okay, because we're still in this world that, we're still expecting, a certain demographic, and without saying, and a certain personality that manages rather than leads. You still, we're still not valuing leadership in its, in its holistic form, let's say, in terms of being able to empathise, in terms of being able to be vulnerable. Those leaders aren't making it to the top. So, and this is what I mean by, there are people like me across, everywhere you look, but they're just getting on, not seeing, I guess, the potential that the ripple effect, I suppose, that they can have. And also as well, I think it is this whole thing about hierarchy, we're not valuing.
Yeah,
we're not
start on that.
Yeah, but we're not valuing. We need boundaries. We need structures. We're human beings. Okay, we do. All right, but we also need to kind of strip our ego back a little bit and remember that just because somebody is younger than us, less experienced than us, doesn't mean that they don't have incredible value and incredible perspectives to bring. That's why I'm a massive, massive advocate of reverse mentoring. Let's learn from the younger people that are coming into the industry. Let's really capitalise on the perspective. We hear it all the time, the younger generation don't want to work, or we'll get them in and they just don't want to work, or they're not very productive. And I'm like, well, maybe. And there is going to be an element of that. In any generation, there are going to be people that just don't want to work, or they do want to work, but their way of working is a little bit different to yours, and they value different things. We've all got different, values, and they change, and, the hierarchy of those change over the time that we're here. But I think, let's stop thinking this is an issue, this is a generational issue, and let's start thinking about how we can kind of talk and work together to change the environments that we're working in. So what is working really, really well that we've been doing years and years and years? What isn't working so well now that we need to adapt so that the younger generation can really thrive, as well as the older generation? But.
Yeah.
There's a lot of sentiment in that, because it's sort of like, say, I think each industry is so different on how it's sort of been, has travelled through the last 20, 30 years. I think post 2000, there was quite a massive shift technologically wise. I'll say that again after I've had a few beers, but it's, even now, I remember being that young graduate and, can use that, use AutoCAD, I can do this. And obviously you were doing draftsmanship on tracing paper and drawing board and things like that. But even I've got to a point now where I'm like, oh, I didn't used to do it like that. Why are you suggesting we do this? Or why doing that?
Yeah.
You do sort of, and you challenge it, but I think it's purely got to come down to the person, as you say. Individuals, just because they don't like doing it a certain way that I expect them to do it, doesn't mean they're wrong, but also doesn't mean they're right. And I do find that sometimes the newer generation, we'll say, not the younger generation that's come through, is sort of like, it takes them a bit of time to appreciate that we're not just like knocking them down or knocking the and it's a really hard thing to learn, to try and support what you don't know. But I suppose I look at it now is that if say I fell, touch wood, say I fell ill tomorrow, I know that my business could probably run for quite a while whilst I'm recovering. And I don't think a lot of businesses maybe don't, because they'll have like quite linchpins in the business that if they are affected, they haven't had enough training or experience to try and take on that leadership.
And that's another really good point as well, in terms of, what I see a lot is, I guess probably depends, on the size of the business, of course. But again, because leadership is still very controlling, okay, it's like we're not giving away enough. We're not kind of, I get it even with, with clients at times, where it's like you need to kind of, give over a little bit more, because if you keep everything to you, if you're keeping everything, if you go off, then yeah, exactly that. How where's the contingency plan? And this is what I mean about the sustainability. There's no sustainability within a business if that's the case.
Just going to use you as an example, because I think it's a great point.
Please don't.
It's a great example. Running a business, got a team around him, but obviously the first priority is that money needs to come into the business to pay for the staff. When a business is running at that all the time, it's like money needs to come in, blah, blah. There's very, very little room for the leader to think about other things like that. So it's not, and that's the truth. So where would you see an example like that? Where
it's quite deafening, really. That sort of the three principles. I think I read somewhere. Did you send me some link? He did send me.
I'm always sending you links.
The three things of like the role of the CEO
that you should only think about.
You should think about.
Always have money.
Yeah, what's in the bank?
Yeah, what's in the bank, and make sure that your team are well looked after or something like that.
Yeah,
so make sure your team are better than you.
So how do they find space? Because I think it's a great point, like to running a successful business, team underneath him, but money needs to be coming in, which means that's the focus, because as soon as money stops coming in, we can't look after everyone else. Where does a leader make that space? Where is it? And how do they do it? Because you obviously look at what you're saying. I think it's key. I think what you talk about is really important to being more sustainable, diverse, leadership, everything. But when would you ever get that moment to sit down? Well, maybe it's a time management thing, that there has to be a part of the week of 2 hours where it's focused purely on being better, bringing in more diverse leaders. But
it's bigger than that. It's bigger than that. I mean, this is exactly what I'm here for.
Exactly.
Just, shameless
not
plug,
to be naive, yeah.
No, but this is what I'm helping, businesses to do. It's what I'm helping leaders to do, is to kind of rethink the way that they're doing things. Because I think the thing is, Dan, is that we're very stuck in this mindset that we've always got to be visible, we've always got to be present, we've always got to be on, right? And it all comes down to us. But actually, it's about how do we surround ourselves with people that are going to, really make sure that we're able to get the best out of ourselves. We're able to get the best out of what we're doing. Okay. And it does create headspace. And I mean, that's a big question, Dan, because it all depends, of course, on a situation. Like you said, it could be for one leader, it could be, time blocking a couple of hours a week to do X, Y, Z, but that's just a sticking plaster, right? And for me, it's all about, it comes down to always culture. What's your mission? What's your vision? Who are you surrounding yourselves with? And have you got that culture where you can have that headspace? And and it doesn't have to be massive blocks of time. It just has to be, whatever works, I guess, for the individual and the business. Yeah. And it's about having people you can trust. It's about taking away that hierarchy. A leader. Yes, a leader needs to set the vision and needs to move forward with stuff. But if you're if you're a leader that's worth your salt, you also know when to take a step back, when to have that headspace to let the people around you, do what they need to do. And I know it's sometimes, well, I'm a micro business or it's just me. I call on that. I call time on that. I'm a micro business. It's just me. But I know where I can, and to be fair, I'm still probably doing some things that I shouldn't be doing that, but I will delegate certain things and I will delegate those things because I know I'm not going to be able to have the impact I need to have and I'm not going to be able to grow the business in the way that I want to if I don't.
Makes sense. So trying to change it's really, really tricky. You offer that support to businesses to do that, to find that space to maybe think a bit bigger. But looking back then, bringing it back a decade or so back into education, how do we teach it early enough that we can catch it? Because what we're doing is, you're right, we've created these leaders that are so stuck in the ways, but actually, can we go get them?
Do you know what, visually, when someone says leader to me,
yeah,
do you know what my immediate thought process goes to?
Simon Sinek.
No, it doesn't. No, it goes to an army battle.
Right. There is. So, no,
finish it goes to an army battle of somebody on a horse going yes.
Does it?
That's my. So for some reason, it's some trigger every time I go. It's really strange. I know this, but it's sort of this a childlike thought that goes to. It's these leaders, the cavalier leading the army, and you're going to tell me there's going to be some sort of psychology.
No, I think that there's. I think that's really important, right? And we need to be, that's something that we need to be talking about more because our schema, right? Our perception, we always come back to our own, experience. And we see the world, we all see the world. We're seeing this right now in very different ways. We're going to go away and have different perspectives of how this podcast went, right? So, but what I'm trying to say is that vision that you've got of that leader, it's quite common, right? And I think that's because that's the way that we are teaching it in schools. And also as well, I just wanted to say that I was talking to someone from the Lighthouse, the Lighthouse charity, and he was telling me that apparently there was research done and, the majority of boys, when they think about a leader, think of Adolf Hitler.
Really?
So this is what I mean. Our perception, our subconscious belief of what a leader is totally skewed. And we need to be having those conversations. We need to be bringing it, because a lot of what we're doing is subconscious. Okay, we need to bring it to that's why I talk about what I talk about, to try and get people to think, oh shit, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And I've always done it this way because I've always just thought that that's the way to do it, but actually it's not. But how do we change things? So I mean, we're not going to change the world overnight, right? But we need to not get overwhelmed either by that. We just need to remember that we just have to keep chipping away, right? And for me, the things that the short to medium term wins at the minute that I think that are very clear to me are that we need to be we've got lots of work going out into school. There's lots of brilliant STEM work going on in schools, but there's not enough consistency. Okay, it all is a bit of a potluck. It's lottery. My son might get someone to come in to talk to him, about STEM. If he's in a particular postcode, because that's where there's some funding or that's where somebody's got some passion around it. And then he might never, ever get that touch point again. So what I'm trying to say is that, with STEM, there needs to be a little bit more investment, a more structured approach, because it's like sales, right? What is it? They say, a lead needs 6 touch points. It needs to see and hear, what you're doing at least 6 times, right? How many kids get the opportunity to have to have STEM throughout every year of their school life? It's maybe once or twice, and also as well, it's not just about that. It's also about how we bring parents and teachers on this journey with us. Okay, because they're the ones that are having the biggest influence. We can absolutely go into a school and show, or take Johnny and Rosie, or I say Luca and Leo because they're my kids. Take them onto site, get them really interested in a trade, let's say, and then they can go home and dad's like, you're not going into that industry, or mum's like, no, you need to go to university. And teachers again are like, well, I hear it all the time. I was talking to someone recently, he's in construction, he's a house builder. He said, my son wants to be a carpenter. He's the same age as my eldest son, so he's in year 9. And the school are like, well, no, you're going to do well in your GCSEs. You can't go off to college. If you're not doing very well at school, you can, at 14, you can go off and you can go.
Do you want really?
Exactly,
yeah.
right? And you can get a trade, right? But if you're doing well at school, right? You're not. So again, there's this stigma around
Bit of control, innit?
Yeah.
So
And we need to
100%.
start educating teachers on the possibilities that are there.
Okay.
it's the same when you go back to when you did your STEM meeting
Yes.
up in the North East. It was like, what do you want to be when you
Oh,
grow
yeah.
up? And like 99% was footballers.
Footballers. No one wanted to do construction.
Well, no, because
then-
I did something recently, and I was like, okay, come on then. You know, the younger By the way, the younger kids. So I did some stuff with younger kids, and they were a little bit more open-minded and a
Yeah,
little
they
bit
always
more
are. Yeah,
creative.
they always are.
But the older kids, like I had like 14, 15-year-old boys. What do you think about when you think about construction? Slave labour, dirty. And that's not even construction anymore,
Yeah.
you know? But even my son, I talk about this all the time, about how my son is doing an engineering GCSE, he was absolutely flabbergasted when I talked to him about modular building and how you could design a house and it could be built in a factory. And then, you know, and he's like, what, you can do that? I was like, yeah, you don't just have to, you know, lay bricks.
It's
Even though that's
mental,
great
isn't
as
it?
well.
It
No, but-
is. You're absolutely, yeah.
But, and
totally
also,
is.
leaning off that, I know we're digressing massively here from like education estates, things like that, but it's sort of like, did you at school ever think about going to the forces? I know some will, but did you?
No.
But it never seems like that there's
I
an
actually
option.
did.
But you did. Well, there you go. You
I,
probably one of the minority now, though, because it's.
I usually am in the minority, but yeah, that's another thing that I've never really spoken. So when I was going to university, because again I was like, I don't know what I want to do. So I was like, I know, I'll go join the RAF. I really fancy being a pilot. Still got perfect eyesight now as well.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Perfect.
I joined. I did my initial training, everything, signed up. They were going to put me through university. I'd come out as an officer. I backed out. I backed out again. Though, when I've spoken to people since, they were like, the forces weren't sold to you in the right way. So it isn't just about construction. Do you know what I mean?
No, but I think but also you think the skill sets you learn from being in those environments. It's. I'm sure I could have been a building surveyor if I went in and did a stint of the army or the RAF or whichever. I just think we're just not being tutored early enough about the benefits and the things you learn in these sort of settings. It's unless you've got family in
We've had
certain
people on,
aspects.
haven't we? We've had people on this podcast talking about this, getting early, getting in, and this could link up really nicely. We're going to there's an idea here that we can might as well just. It's an exclusive idea. Obviously, we have estates teams working on schools already, running multi-million pound projects.
Yeah.
It's happening in their school,
Yes.
but we don't allow them to be involved.
Exactly.
So we have a very, very strong link here. It's just about
I
how
saw
we
that
make
link
that
as soon
happen.
as you started talking to me about this.
So
we're still working in silos.
We are. So the estates gets done, the roof gets done. You know, £1 million roof gets done. The kids don't even know.
No, exactly.
It's just done. Builders come on, scaffolding goes up, gets all thing done.
Not bothered.
They go away. We've got a new roof. But what happens if we started to bring kids on the roof? To talk, there'll be health and safety
gone mad.
disaster here. But we had Bethany on the other week. We started to talk about health and safety, bringing it in. We have so many pieces, and you're absolutely right. It's the same message that we don't get people involved early enough.
We have, but it's not just about getting involved earlier, which I do think is important. Like I said, it's also about bringing, the people that are having the biggest influence on our children on the journey with us. So it's okay taking them on the roof and showing them, this is fascinating, this is great. But then if they go back into the classroom and the teachers aren't really,
on it, 100%.
So, and this is what I mean. This is where I see the gap. And it was the same when I was working in on what I was doing in schools. It was like, we need to be getting in to teach training providers. They're not, again, the issue here, and this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, it's why I'm trying to collaborate with as many people, it's why I'm doing my podcast, because we've got just people getting on with what they're doing like this, right? And not seeing the scope. Communication is so poor, so poor.
There's no one showcasing as much anymore, I don't feel. It's sort of like, so apart from, unless you've got a big team and you've got in a big business where that they can afford a job to do that thing, no one seems to be as bothered. It's
because it's tight, isn't it? Everything's tight.
Race to the
Imagine
bottom.
you just having, £100,000 pot spare to go, do you know what, we're going to put loads of social value on, and that just doesn't happen.
No.
Companies are so stretched.
But
come on, you can give me it back here.
It doesn't have to be that value, does it?
No.
There's two things here. Well, one actually, because it comes back to the same thing. And I made this point yesterday, okay, when I was talking about everyone wants that green story, right? leaders will make it work, right? It's never really about money. It's about leadership, right? And you don't need to be throwing thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds at stuff. You need to just be looking at how is it integrated within what you are doing in your day-to-day actions? How is it integrated within your culture? Right? Yeah. You know, how are you just small things, getting small things out across social media platforms? How are you kind of, you know, just having conversations? It doesn't have to be huge gestures, but it comes down to leadership. A good leader will make this stuff happen.
It is funny because sorry, I'm
mate,
proper going at it now, but it feels like it always comes to something that has to be enforced, has to be a threat.
Yeah.
So, for example, like the DFE, everyone needs to be net zero by 2050. That's just like a threat, isn't it? So rather than trying to encourage the schools, I'm sure they are with different schemes, things like that, trying to push the sort of sustainability arm to say they're not empowering the trusts or the network. No. They're just sort of, it comes back to a bit of a threat at the end of it going, well, you have to do it by, and in my mind, they go, all right, well, we've got 20 years to deal with that.
Yep.
Rather than saying having more, I know they've got other targets, but it just seems why has it always got to be a threat? Why can't it be sort of like a leadership view of like, this is where we're going with this?
Well, I think again this comes down to, because we do still live in this world again where it's like it's got to be, you've got to lead by fear, right?
Yeah.
Well, actually, you look at any good businesses that are really leading forward with this and are making the changes. They've kind of adopted it and have integrated it into everything that they're doing, not because they have to, but because they want to. And they're setting the vision, they're selling the story, you know.
To be fair, we're going to have to do a second episode because Rebecca, we could talk for absolutely ever. I can't believe how long we've gone on for already.
We've only got to the first 20 years. Yeah.
I know. We're going to we'll have to end this part one. We're going to call it part one. We're definitely getting part 2. What's the vision? Tell me what's the vision look like for you?
For me,
in terms of if you had the perfect setup, what would it be between what the work you're doing and education? What would that look like?
Honestly, that's a really, really, really good question. But for me, I just want to see more collaboration, better communication, so that we can unlock the potential. And I know that sounds, when I say that, it all sounds a bit, airy-fairy. But, you know, it's not. It's about getting in rooms. For me, my short-term goal is to get in as many rooms as possible, to get as many people thinking and to kind of get people to take action. There's only so much I can do. You know, I haven't got a big team behind me. I haven't got like masses of funding behind me. You know, I just need to bring people along the journey and we just let's talk about it. I don't even know what it's going to look like, if I'm honest, because who does know?
Yeah.
You know, we've got to kind of let trust that, you know, with the right intentions, it's going to go that way. But for me, you know, that's what it's all about. It's all about.
I'll be honest, with voices like yours, though, it's how we make an impact, isn't it? And if you're not going to do it, who is?
Yeah. Call to action, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. It absolutely is.
Part 2, maybe on Rebecca's podcast.
100%.
Oh, yes.
That'll be a good one. Yeah.
Yes.
We'd love to. I don't know. There's so much to go into here, and we will. We're going to keep it going. We're going to need definitely a part 2 because it's so important. But I just want to say thank you for giving us a very, very short snapshot of everything you're doing.
Thank you.
Let's keep it going.
Yeah, brilliant.
Thank you
so much for having me.
Thank you.